Good evening. It is 6:30. Members of council are assembled when you're ready to begin.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores for Monday, October 20th, 2025. Welcome all members, everyone in the gallery, and everyone watching via the live stream. Glad everybody's with us. Second item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, and Councillor Halpin has that this evening.
We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and shaping the community. We commit to truth and to reconciliation, to acknowledge the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. Today, I was fortunate enough to attend, along with the mayor, the Wenjack walk at Fairy Lake. And just to me, as a father and as a teacher, to think that we took people's children away, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away, and sometimes return them years later, missing their language and everything. We need to reconcile for what we did, and we need to owe up for that. And that was very striking to me today. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people. And we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing, along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation.
Thank you. Third item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest. Any member have one of those I'd like to declare at this time? Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. No additions, deletions, or amendments. No minutes to adopt. So we're on to public meetings, and we have two public meetings this evening. So the first one is a public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z-2024-030 and minor revision to draft plan of subdivision for 1T-89017 for Southampton Landing. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act. If anyone from the public is interested in this application or wishes to receive a notice of the decision, please send an email to bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. First, we will receive a report from planning staff. Then we will hear from the public who are here in person, virtually, or who have submitted correspondence to the email address mentioned before. Then council members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I will ask them to reserve their comments on the application until we have heard from the public. Members of the public are advised that the right to appeal the decision on this application is limited to specified persons and public bodies as defined in the Planning Act, or the owner or applicant of the land subject to the amendment, who have provided oral or written comments to council on the application before the decision is made. After we've heard from the public, council will discuss and consider a recommendation on the application. So I now declare the public meeting to be open, and I will ask the planner on the file to present the application. And this evening, this one is from Julie Steeper. Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. The purpose of the application this evening
We're having
is
trouble hearing you. Is it, give us one sec here.
just one moment.
It might be, I could hear you slightly, so it might be on your end, Julie. You have an issue with your microphone? Yeah, try us again here, Julie. Let's see if we can hear you.
Just one moment.
Well, that's better. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we hear you now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. The purpose of the application this evening is to amend the town zoning bylaw to add site-specific provisions to the highway commercial zone. If approved, the amendments would facilitate a mixed use of commercial and residential uses on the subject lands. A holding removal is part of this application and removes the holding from the subject site and the remainder of the subdivision. A minor revision to the draft approved plan of subdivision is being processed concurrently with this amendment application as well. The property is located in Southampton on the east side of Railway Street and Highway 21, southeast of McNabb Street and south of Peel Street. The property is referred to as Block 92 in Phase 3 of the draft plan of subdivision. The site is surrounded by a mixed use of commercial, residential, and industrial uses. The PPS encourages the development of mixed densities and land uses that make the most efficient use of land and resources. The PPS also encourages intensification, a range of housing types and tenatures, and compact form of development where it can appropriately be accommodated. Directing new development and intensification to settlement areas is supported. The goals and objectives of both the county and local official plans direct much of the future growth to primary urban communities, such as Southampton, to support the efficient use of land and infrastructure. Currently, the site is vacant and the applicant is considering development concept designs that consist of mixed commercial and residential uses. The potential proposals vary between mixed-use buildings and freestanding single-use residential and commercial buildings. The applicant has demonstrated through the development of these concept designs that the site can support mixed use. The site has immediate access to Lake Forest Drive and proximity to Highway 21. The future development will connect to existing municipal services. The proposal supports the efficient use of land and infrastructure. The highway commercial zone permits a broad range of commercial uses and permits accessory dwelling units in accordance with provisions in the bylaw. Standalone residential uses are not permitted. The rezoning would permit a mix of residential and commercial uses, both as possible buildings and independent single-use buildings. The rezoning would also recognize an increase to the maximum building height, a decrease to the minimum front yard setback and interior side yard setback for commercial uses, and remove the minimum floor area requirement for retail, office, and food stores. It would also permit shared parking between the commercial and residential visitor parking. The rezoning would also identify that Lake Forest Drive shall be considered the front lot line and that certain provisions relating to accessory dwelling units not apply. Allowing single-use buildings within a mixed-use site allows for different built forms that do not solely rely on vertical stacked buildings. Permitting freestanding residential buildings allows for flexibility regarding functional separation of uses for privacy, noise, or operational needs. Permitting standalone use buildings would still meet the intent and purpose of the site and would still allow for the integration of compatible uses in proximity to each other. The applicant is looking to allow flexibility on the site by maintaining an option for mixed-use buildings in various concept plans. The existing lot frontage and area of this property are considered suitable for the development proposed, which has been demonstrated by the applicant. Allowing relief from the minimum lot area frontage requirements of section 3.6.1 B and C is considered minor change to the proposal and no further notice is recommended. The design, including the size, number of buildings, and number of units for both the commercial and residential uses, have yet to be determined by the applicant. Only the concept plans have been prepared. In this case, allowing for more options in commercial unit sizes permits greater flexibility in the final design for the site. Wording in the bylaw is included to ensure a commercial component is maintained. Waiving the minimum floor area requirement is considered reasonable for this site. The inclusion of additional commercial uses is not anticipated to create adverse impacts to the surrounding area. The proposed uses are considered compatible with the residential uses. The applicant is also proposing to prohibit commercial uses that would be more conducive for a single commercial site. It is not anticipated that allowing for a reduced front yard would result in any impacts to surrounding properties for the use of Lake Forest Drive. The intent of the front yard is being maintained. As well, with this application, the applicant is proposing adequate buffering and landscaping to minimize any potential impact associated with the commercial development. The purpose of the side yard setback is to ensure there will be enough permeable surfaces maintained to allow for things like drainage, amenity space, and green landscaping. The setback also mitigates potential massing and overlook concerns where multi-story buildings are proposed. The intent of the interior side yard is being maintained. The applicant is proposing a maximum building height of 14.5 meters. Please be aware the bylaw has been changed to reflect the change in height after I submitted my report. The applicant is still maintaining a height of 4 stories. The applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum height by 4.5 meters. Buildings that typically provide for ground floor commercial units require greater height than residential units. Allowing a larger height allows for the flexibility and design to accommodate both uses. The intent of the height regulation is to control the height so that structures are in keeping with the residential character of the area. The maximum height helps ensure development maintains an appropriate scale and reduces potential land use conflicts. The applicant is meeting all other required setbacks, lot coverage, and open space requirements. The relief requested for the differences in setbacks and height are not anticipated to create any negative impacts. The applicant has not determined the number of buildings or units, and therefore the number of parking spaces cannot be determined at this time. The subject property is large enough to accommodate the required vehicular and bicycle parking. Shared parking is an efficient use of land and infrastructure, and it reduces impervious hardscape coverage of a site. The shared parking would be complementary given the typical commercial use would be during the day and visitor parking would be in the evenings and weekends. As stated previously, a holding removal for the entire subdivision has been incorporated into this bylaw. The holding provision was originally applied to ensure that stormwater management plan was prepared and approved prior to development. Town and SPCA comments were received with no concern regarding the proposed holding removal. Therefore, it can be removed to allow the proponent to proceed with their development. The proponent is proposing to remove a utility block, block 97, and rezone it as part of the proposed mixed-use development proposal on block 92. Town staff have indicated the utility block is no longer required for the proposed subdivision. Town staff recommended revisions to the conditions to reflect the changes proposed through the zoning application. The applicant initiated the minor modification to the conditions after further consultation with town and county staff. There are also administrative changes to the conditions that remove, amend outdated text. The changes to the conditions are considered to be minor in nature. The county is seeking the town's endorsement of the minor revision to the draft plan of subdivision in accordance with the modified draft plan and conditions. No comments of concern were received from agencies and no public comments were received on this application. And this concludes my report. I believe the applicant's planning consultant, Emily Elliott from MHBC, is here to speak to their application.
Okay, thank you very much for the report. So we'll now hear from members of the public, beginning with the applicant or their agent. And I'm told the agent for the applicant is here, and so whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Charbonneau and members of council, and thanks, Julie, for that presentation and summary of your staff report. I am Emily Elliott. I'm with
Just make sure you speak right into that mic. So
Right.
folks are
I am Emily Elliott. I'm with MHBC, and we're the applicant with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment application for the Southampton Landing subdivision. I did submit a presentation. It was included in your agenda package. Not sure if we should put it on the screen or just refer. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Thank you. So as I said, I'm here tonight to support the staff recommendation for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment as presented, including the minor change to the height permission that Julie described in her presentation. So I'll try to be brief and not repeat too much of what Julie said, and then I'm happy to answer any questions at the end as well. Sorry, there we go. As I said, the lands are within the Southampton Landing subdivision. That's within Southampton in the southern part, and it has frontage on Railway Street. It is a three-phase plan of subdivision. Phases 1 and 2 were registered previously. Phase 1 is completely developed, and Phase 2 is partially complete. The third phase, the applicants or the owners are working towards registration. The existing phases in the subdivision have residential uses, stormwater management facilities, and there are some environmental features. The application this evening pertains predominantly to blocks 92 and 97. These are vacant blocks in the third phase. Block 92 is outlined in red in the image on the screen. It was originally planned as a commercial block, and it has frontage on Railway Street and Lake Forest Drive, which is one of the streets in the subdivision. Block 97 is a utility block that was originally planned as a utility block, but has not actually been required for utility infrastructure. So through the modification, it's proposed to be integrated within block 92 there, and then the zoning would apply to both blocks to establish permission for development. And as Julie said, the plan of subdivision modification application is concurrent to the zoning bylaw amendment. In terms of the policies that apply to the lands are designated primary urban community in the county OP. And this designation allows for a full range of urban uses, including residential. And this designation is intended to accommodate the majority of growth in the community. In the town of Saugeen Shores official plan, the lands are designated residential. So that's despite their current highway commercial zoning. The residential zoning permits a range of residential uses, including low and medium density residential. And then the entire subdivision is within a special policy area called Special Policy Area 3, and it relates to environmental features and floodplain management and ties into the holding provision. In terms of the zoning bylaw amendment request, really we're proposing three things here. The first is to establish site-specific regulations related to the highway commercial zone to allow for a broader range of uses and appropriate regulations. And I'll kind of get into that in a second. But the second is to rezone the western of the southern boundaries of the lands to an environmental protection zone. Those lands are proposed to be zoned EP because there's a drainage swale that's currently in place and it needs to be maintained in perpetuity. So by zoning that portion of the site EP, the range of uses are restricted and that drainage swale will be maintained for the long term. And the third thing that Julie mentioned as well is just to remove the holding symbol that applies to the subdivision. The holding symbol required approval of a stormwater management report, and this was completed through the subdivision registration process. With respect to the site-specific provisions for the HC zone, the first is to establish permission for multiple residential uses, and these are intended to be within a standalone building or a mixed-use building, and then appropriate regulations are proposed those are consistent with the residential regulations in the zoning bylaw. The second is to revise the commercial uses that are currently permitted on the site by restricting commercial uses that are not so compatible with residential, like automobile sales and equipment sales and servicing, a gas station, and uses of that nature that require larger sites and larger floor plates. And instead, we're proposing to establish additional commercial uses that are more in line with neighborhood serving uses like a bake shop or personal service, a catering establishment. They're all set out in the zoning bylaw. So uses that are a bit more small scale to reflect uses that are compatible with the community. And in doing this, we're looking to remove the floor area requirement for commercial uses just to reflect the nature of the uses that are proposed. We're also proposing a maximum building height of 4 stories, or in this case, as written in the zoning bylaw, 14.5 meters. And that's to facilitate a 4-story mixed-use building. And as Julie mentioned, the ground floor does need that little bit of extra height to facilitate a commercial use. And then we're looking for a couple site-specific regulations. One, to recognize that Lake Forest Drive is the front lot line, and that's just for simplicity in interpreting the zoning because it's a bit of an unusual site. And then establishing a reduced front yard for commercial and a reduced side yard for commercial. So those are just to ensure the building's located close to the street, but also provide sufficient buffering to the adjacent residential uses. And the last one that we're looking for is shared parking between commercial and the residential visitor component, because those two uses parking space requirements are inherently compatible because commercial visitors come at different times than residential visitors typically. So by doing this, we kind of create more efficient use of the site and more efficient use of parking spaces. As we prepared the zoning bylaw amendment application, we provided several concepts to the staff to just demonstrate the feasibility that this site could be developed as a mixed use multiple residential site. And these were provided just to kind of illustrate some different options. They were included in the staff report. They're conceptual only. I'll just spend a minute going through them, but they're just to demonstrate the feasibility of this site for a variety of different forms of development. The first one here on the screen shows a 4-story mixed-use building. In this concept, there would be about 40 units and 1,000 square meters of commercial space on the ground floor and 94 parking spaces. And you can see that the drainage swales kind of hatched in around the boundary of the site, so that's accommodated in each of the concepts. The second concept just has a different orientation, but a similar idea. So we have a multiple residential building with some ground floor commercial. The number of units would be between 45 and 60, depending on how they were configured and how the commercial space on the ground floor was configured. And a different approach to parking here that shows 73 spaces. In this concept, we have a different design where we have 4-plex type units, so smaller buildings, and in this you could accommodate commercial within one of these buildings, or I imagine that one of them is a standalone commercial use. So here you can accommodate about 32 dwelling units and 40 parking spaces. So those are the concepts we provided to staff, and again, it was to just demonstrate that the zoning standards that we were putting forward would allow for the development of the site. So in summary, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is intended to facilitate the development of the site through establishing appropriate zoning regulations for mixed-use development. The development or the proposal is consistent with the provincial planning statement, and it supports the efficient use of the land and infrastructure. It conforms to the county official plan and the town official plan, which does designate the lands as residential. And it facilitates multiple residential development on a block within an existing plan of subdivision, and allowing for a broader range of dwelling unit types while also maintaining the intended commercial function of the site. So thanks again to Julie for the staff report and presentation and working with us through this process. And we're supportive of her recommendation and happy to answer any questions of council.
Very good. Thank you very much. So now we will hear from members of the public, either here to speak in support of the application or with questions, concerns, or objections to the application. I do have one individual on my list here, so we'll start with him. It's Mr. Dan Villeneuve. Mr. Villeneuve, if you have comments for us, go right ahead, sir.
I guess it's more of a comment. We're already struggling with access to Highway 21 from McNabb, and we've approached town council and members of the MTO about putting in a light, and they're proposing possibly something different like a roundabout. But so now we're going to have yet another entrance onto the highway. That's already a bottleneck. So our concern, my daughter living on Lake Forest and I living on Marshall Place, is that people are going to use our streets as a throughway to get to the other entrance to get on Highway 21. That was one of our concerns. And the other one was the unknown commercial businesses, the types of commercial businesses that were going to be proposed for this new location. It's sort of an unknown, and we're just concerned, an auto body shop or something like that. But thanks for clarifying that. And anyhow, those are the concerns that I'm bringing forth from my neighbors who aren't here tonight. But thanks for listening.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish to speak to the application? You do? Okay, come on up, please. Yeah, make sure to state your name for the record when you get to the mic.
My name is Rosemary Egger, and I live on Marshall Place. And I, too, am concerned with the amount of traffic that we are going to be having to deal with within our community. And it's going to be very dangerous on Highway 21. And right now, you can barely cross the street in the summertime. And I am very concerned. I'm glad Dan brought it up. I think the clarity that we have with the new type of commercial zoning that would potentially be allowed to be in there is a bit more palatable for us. And, but I am a little bit concerned if there are that many residential units that are added to the mix. The problem is access to the highway.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Do we have any other members of the public? I don't see anybody else probably in the room. Is there anybody joining us online? I'll look to the clerk. Okay, are there any written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report, presentation, or oral submissions? The answer is no. So, okay, so then we'll move on to questions from members of council. Any questions at this stage from council members? Start with the deputy mayor and then Councillor Helpin.
Thank you, and through you, I'll try and make sure that there are questions. I do have some comments for when we get to that part of the meeting as well. I think just to confirm with Julie through you, you are now saying that there's a change from what we received. The height is not 12 meters, it's 14.5 meters. That's referred to as a minor change. It's almost a 50% increase in height, but it's 14.5, okay? I wanted to ask, and I appreciate that they're concept plans. I have some comments about the change in zoning, going from highway commercial to others, but I'll hold on to those. I did want to ask though, because it's one of the few times we have available to us to talk. Reference was made to some issues with the highway. The 25-meter turning left lane, when that eventually gets constructed, which would be into this new access road, the developer builds that, right? We don't do that. That's a question.
Turn that over to Candace Ham.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yes, that's something that the developer will be responsible for. That came out of the traffic impact study for the overall development, that at the time of the construction of phase 3, that they would be required to do that southbound turn lane from the highway into this development.
Okay, I'd like to hope too that the sense is that has potentially something happens in phase 3 that Lake Forest Drive will be opened out to the highway so that any kind of construction activity is coming in off the highway and not through the existing residence areas. Is that the plan going forward, that the road out to the highway would come first ahead of construction?
Thank you. That is definitely something that can be discussed and negotiated at the site plan agreement stage for this phase. So we can comment on phasing and when we would like to see different pieces of the development advance. So we will definitely, staff will bring that back and have those discussions with the developer.
And I wanted to ask a question about block 97. I think the way, and I can be corrected on this, but I believe that was land in the original plan that would have transferred over to the public realm. So being asked now to turn it back. You know, it might not be needed as a utility corridor, but it still was land that was going to, I believe, anyway, be turned over to the public. I wanted to ask, on the drawing, it was really hard to make out the block numbers. So I'm thinking that block 93, the stormwater pond, that's defined. 94 is a park. I wanted to ask, where is 94 in the bigger site? 95 is hazard land, which I think is, you know, in between what's been built and the stuff coming on Peel, the townhouses on Peel Street. But are there connections between these areas that are the public spaces, in particular the park? Because I'm really hesitant about just, you know, 97 just changing back when I think originally it was going to be deeded to the town. Again, you can correct me about that. And if we're being asked to do that, what is the public getting in return for doing that? Because it's about a 61 meter distance, about six to 7 meters wide. So it's a little chunk of land that if we're being asked to turn that back, what's coming to the public? Because it was obviously part of the original plan. So I am, where is the park, the block 94? Where does it sit on this plan of subdivision?
The planner? Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So block 94 is, if you can see my cursor on the screen, is just up in here. And so not close to the subject of the current proposals right now. And I understand that block may have already been conveyed to the municipality through earlier phases.
Okay, well then, just to confirm, access to that park for the public is off of Peel or Railway? Looks like it's Peel Street, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And one more. The town in their comments asked very specifically if the R1 zones in phase 3 are included in this application to remove the holding provision. Has that been cleaned up?
The planner?
Can you hear me?
We hear you, I guess.
Thank you. Sorry, in the last question there, I was unable to mute. Regarding the question with the holding removal, the holding removal is being cleaned up with this application. The holding will be removed from the entire subdivision regarding the stormwater management report that was submitted.
So specifically the R1 zones that were in the phase 3 design or phase 3 part of the plan, they're in this particular application then to remove the holding provision.
That's correct. The holding is being removed from those residential lands as well with this bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Halpin and then Grace. Then Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Julie, my first question is about the prohibited uses, commercial uses, which are listed in your report. I'd like to confirm, may I confirm, that if the applicant, if the property changes hands at some point in the future before this development is realized, will those provisions of the bylaw still apply?
If I may, yes, Councillor Grace, those provisions will apply. They will be established in the bylaw prohibiting those uses. So if ownership were to change at any time, that is part of the zoning of the property and it would be maintained.
And related to that, on the gas bar prohibition, because the report does talk about the fact that that has an extra prohibition because of the source water protection prohibition of its proximity to the water intake at the end of Bay Street. Is that going to be included in the bylaw or in some kind of agreement? So we know that that Source Water Protection Authority is governing that particular use?
The bylaw doesn't speak to source water, it just speaks to the use. That wasn't part of the wording in the bylaw. But prohibiting that use will identify it as being prohibited for any future development for the site.
Okay. Thank you. And you're coming, or the applicant is coming to us with several options for designs. If this was to be approved, once the design is finalized, what further staff and council oversight is required?
If I may, through you, the next step in a process like this will be to go through site plan control. And that would be with town staff, and maybe Candace Ham can speak to the further process of the town during site plan control.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, if I may, prior to the site plan control process, we'll be looking at having the finalization of the approval of this phase of the subdivision. So you'll see this again at council when we're negotiating the subdivision agreement before we get to the site plan control stage. And at that point, there would be the detailed design.
Further comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the report talked about a transportation impact study in the southbound left turning lane, 25-meter storage. For the traffic that's coming out of Lake Forest Drive, just simply, will the traffic be able to exit north and south on that drive? When they come out of that, on that road, are they able to exit north or south?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yes, that's my understanding. So there is a southbound lane to turn into the property, but there's no restrictions on left or right turns exiting off of Lake Forest Drive.
Thanks for that. The parkland dedication on page, I think it's in your report, Candace, and it talks about parkland dedication owned to the town. Yeah, I'm assuming that means owed to the town, right? Is that correct? So owed to the town for phase 3 from 2% to 5%? That's owed, correct? So where did the 2% to 5% come from? Can you explain that?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So the Planning Act specifies where there are residential lots, the town can be seeking up to 5% of parkland dedication. When we're looking at other uses such as commercial, the Planning Act specifies only 2%. So there's maybe, with the mixed use, we may be looking further at that breakdown of commercial uses versus residential and what the town can actually seek. I will point out that parkland dedication, I believe, has been covered off for the entire subdivision. So we'll just run the numbers and make sure that that we're not exceeding that request of what we're permitted to ask for.
It's got to do with the 2% commercial, that blend. And I walked that piece of parkland back when it was developed 4 or 5 years ago with the owner. And so I know where that parkland is, but on the mapping, I see another piece of, I'm getting a little confused by, and I think our deputy mayor asked the same question about parkland, and it was in top right-hand corner. So Just clarify for me, is that a second piece of parkland dedication? I know where the first piece is. Is that the same piece as the first piece of parkland? I'm a little confused by that.
I'm sorry, can you clarify when you're talking about the second piece? Are you referring to a specific block or the block in question tonight?
I think it was the block that our deputy mayor alluded to, block 95. I think it was. I have to go back. I'm on so many reports here, but it was block 95. And I think our deputy mayor asked where the access was coming from. Was it Peel Street or McNabb? And the answer was Peel. So is that block 95 different from the first piece of parkland dedication that was dedicated many years ago?
So when we're looking at the draft plan, what I'm seeing is that block 94 was parklands, and that block 95 is actually the environmental hazard area that's also been picked up. This was before my time with the town, so I'm not sure if Jay can maybe step in and help with the answer on ownership of those lands.
Yes, thank you. Blocks 94 and 95 constitute the entire park dedication to the town. Block 94 contains more of the open space, whereas the other 95, 94, they're trail connectivity. And the block 95 connects into Marshall Street, I think. Sorry, I've forgotten which one is Lake Forest, which one is Marshall, at the south end.
Explains it. Thanks for that. The stormwater retention pond, stormwater for that entire phase 1, 2, 3, was that all covered off of McNabb Street years ago when it was Friends on McNabb Street? Did a pretty nice job with the stormwater retention area. Is that all covered off? Like, is that covered for phase 3 as well?
Yes, that's the intent, that stormwater will be directed from phase 3 to that same stormwater pond.
Further comments or questions? Councillor Grace?
Yes, sorry, I meant to ask this, returning to the height question. How high, do you know how high the apartments and the condos further north off the highway are? Does anybody know that? The height of the, like, for instance, the ones at the corner of Adelaide and the highway, or the new ones that have just been built that are a little farther south?
The manager of development services.
Yes, the apartments at Adelaide and the highway are 4 stories, so they exceed the normal standard 12 meter. They're at like 13 or 14 meters. And the new apartments as well, given their zoning, are permitted to be taller than 10 meters, as the existing highway commercial where they're proposing in line with those buildings as well.
Okay, further questions from members? Yeah, Vice Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, the last question I had was about the development concepts, the 1, 2, 3. Explain to me again when that decision's made and which concept is chosen.
If I may, through you, Mayor, typically the point where the applicant decides their development concept is typically at site plan control when they finalize the more detailed design regarding their proposal.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I just want to get this clear in my mind. There's going to be access to this area off of Highway 21, or am I incorrect?
The planner?
Sorry.
If I may, through you, Mayor, yes, there will be access from Highway 21 to Lake Forest Drive.
And again, if that's the case, will there be a special left turn lane only on Highway 21? onto Lake Forest? Or is there just everybody take their chances here?
The planner?
If I may through you, Mayor, the traffic study indicated that a turning lane was required.
She says a turning lane is required and will be required.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, I didn't get an answer to the, if Block 97 has requested transferred, is there a trade-off? Because I believe that in the original plan, that was going to be deeded to the town or given to the towns in the public's interest. And again, it's not an insignificant amount of land. It's 61 meters by 6 or 7 meters wide. So has there been any discussion about that?
Planner?
Perhaps this question is best directed to the applicant in regards to the future needs. The utility purpose that block was assigned for is no longer required. However, that could form part of the proposed development, which could be for future amenity space for this development. But perhaps the applicant can speak further to the proposed use of the utility block.
The agent for the applicant.
Thank you through the mayor, and thanks for putting the plan on the screen. So the utility corridor is shown in green here and is proposed to be added to Block 92, the commercial block. The utility corridor was specifically required for utility purposes. It wasn't intended to function as a trail within the subdivision or connect to the park block that was shown earlier. So you can see on the screen, it does connect to the public street and then straight onto adjacent lands that are not forming part of the public park network in this area or trail network. So there is no loss in terms of public amenity in the community, and parkland dedication was provided in accordance with the Planning Act through the phases of the subdivision that were drafted, approved, and registered, and if there is additional parkland required once the calculation increasing to 5% is determined, then it will be provided. But no, since it was just a utility corridor that didn't provide a recreational or amenity function, there's no proposal to change the approach to parkland dedication.
Okay. Any further questions? I was just going to ask, and maybe the agent for the applicant can answer this for me. I just have interest, what was behind the choice of the additional commercial uses that you're looking for selecting? Why did you select that particular list?
Thanks. Through the mayor, or sorry, yourself. We looked through the uses that were permitted in the commercial zones of the zoning bylaw and selected those that were neighborhood commercial type uses, and then restricted those that were like an automobile service station requiring larger sites and higher traffic and that type of thing. So it was through looking at what zones were permitted in other commercial zones of the current zoning bylaw that we selected that list.
Okay, there's just a couple of odd ones there, like a funeral home is a strange one to select for a neighborhood. But anyway, okay. Are there any further questions? I don't see any. So if there are no more questions, then I will now declare the public meeting to be closed, and we'll consider a recommendation. The recommendation is that, subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting, the council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z-2024-030 Southampton Landing and bylaw 99-2025, and that council resolve that no further notice is necessary with respect to the minor change in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment in accordance with the provisions of section 3417 of the Planning Act, and that council provide direction to the County of Bruce Approval Authority to approve minor revision to draft plan of subdivision 41T-89017 Southampton Landing in accordance with the draft plan and conditions of draft approval attached. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halpin. Questions or comments from members? We'll start with the Deputy Mayor and then Halpin.
Thank you, and through you, my whole life, Luke, I've lived next door to a funeral home. It is a neighborhood kind of thing. Anyway, having said that, the height thing, as much as it's almost 50% higher than what would normally be allowed. It's the right place to put height. It's adjacent to the highway. I want to be supportive of this because I think that residential and commercial mixing, that is the way of the future. I'm extremely concerned, though, about changing zoning from highway commercial to something else. When you look at Southampton, the stretch through Southampton, you go on the other side of the highway, there's no potential for any highway commercial coming in from South Street on the west side of the highway, because residential's right up to it almost, and then the rail trail's there. And then you go out, you shoot out the other end of Southampton, and on one side of the highway is the river. In many places it's pretty close. Or again, there's not big areas that are sitting there waiting. So this is really, the highway commercial thing that's left along the stretch of the highway coming in from the south. And the point of having highway commercial zoning is to have space for some larger things. So I'm very much a fan of neighborhood commercial activity. However, there won't be any opportunity for anything larger if we change the zoning on this away from highway commercial. And I don't know what may come or what might not come, but it is in many ways the only highway commercial zoned vacant land kind of sitting there. And it is very strategically located right on the highway. So I have some concerns about that. I do want to just encourage the developer to continue to develop the stretch along the highway up on the berm. It goes back to the original document. It talked about a raised area 1.5 meters, I think, above the grade of the highway. And it was intended to be significantly landscaped and, real pretty, because that's the gateway parkway kind of location into Southampton. And I want to encourage that really come to fruition. But I have some real concern about changing zoning when the intent of highway commercial is for larger activity. I am a fan, though, of mixed. So I'm probably leaning on the voting no, but just because the future, like where is the highway commercial potential in Southampton? This is one of the few spots. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I think perfect place for highway commercial is on the highway, and this is on the highway. I'm personally a big fan of having mixed commercial and residential. It's not a new concept. If you go down any main street, there's stores on the bottom and there was apartments above. I think it's a good use of land. It's a good use of density. I believe that, a traffic study was done. There's going to be a turn lane coming in there. I'm sure the traffic study probably looked at the neighborhood as well, but there are features that can be designed to keep the traffic from going through all the subdivisions. So, I think it's a good proposal, and we'll get a chance to look at this during site planning. And will there be 2 points that we will look at this again, the council? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So I can support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stack, and then Grace.
Of course, I think I've made this comment before. I just continue to wonder, what's the point of zoning bylaws if we just make we seem to have minor variances really frequently. We're getting some in the next month on the other end of Port Elgin. So I just continue to echo a bit of frustration that it just seems like I'm not really sure what the point of zoning anything if we just come in and make amendments at all times. My only other comment is just on the transportation impact study. I probably should have asked it. We've seen a couple of these before. I just don't have a lot of faith in the veracity of these studies. It would be really great at some point to actually see like the terms of reference for how these are conducted. Cause I just get the sense that sometimes it's just someone sitting there for a couple of hours monitoring traffic on a Wednesday. So I'm worried that we sort of rely very heavily on these traffic impact assessments. It's not clear to me, maybe it says it in here, whether the proponent is the one that hired the assessment agency. I don't know. It's not clear based on what I'm reading. It could be in the report. I don't recall. And my other comment is just about the height generally. So I understand Councillor Halpin's point that this is highway commercial. I don't disagree. I think where my concern is we're starting to see these buildings crop up, and I'm not seeing that they're entirely, like there remains to be a high vacancy rate. So we continue to approve all these buildings all over town. We get feedback, not always positive, from members of the community. And again, I've asked this before, I'll position again. I'd love at some point to see what our vacancy, like affordability and vacancy with all these buildings coming up, because I'm just not seeing a lot of benefit to the community as a result of these large scale buildings being built. Again, the reason I'm saying is I've made comments on other issues we brought before council. I'm reserving final judgment until I see some data, but I think that's something that's lacking in a lot of these discussions at the municipality levels. I don't know what I don't know. So we're making all these decisions, we're building all these buildings, and I'm still seeing rents at the $2,200, $2,500 mark. So we're talking about affordability. I'm not really seeing all these buildings resulting in a more affordable place to live for folks who don't work in a few key high paying industries in the area. So no questions, just same comment I make all the time, which is I'm not sure what we're doing with zoning, because every time we come here, there's I don't think a lot of these amendments are minor in nature, frankly. I think we're a bit lax on the test. And then we just continue to make these changes, and we don't have data in front of us whether we're making the right decisions.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? Oh, you had Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I do think that it's a good idea to mix commercial and residential. My biggest concern, regardless of the fact that there is this proposal to have a direct entrance off of Highway 21 onto Lake Forest and then into the development, is I thought Mr. Villeneuve's point about about folks trying to avoid that troublesome McNabb intersection by off the highway by taking a route through the subdivision is a valid concern. Yeah, I guess that's my concern. I am glad to see those prohibitions of the list of certain types of businesses that will not be permitted, and that would transfer over for the length of the agreement, even if it was transferred to another owner. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from members? I'll get Councillor Halpin and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So when it comes to site control, if we wanted to, we could recommend traffic calming features through that Lake Forest Drive.
I don't know what we can do. It's certainly just an important note is council is not the decision-making authority when it comes to site planning. That's reserved for the administration. And then I'll turn it over to Candace for further comment.
Yes, I'd have to look into it further as to what extent offsite works can be incorporated into site planning. I know to a certain extent there can be things such as landscaping in the boulevards and things that are negotiated. So that's definitely something that can be explored if that's necessary on Lake Forest Drive.
The Deputy Mayor.
I wanted to ask through you just for confirmation and clarification, because you kind of hit on it. Councillor Halpin received a response that there were 2 more times that council would potentially see something, but then the question is like, when do we actually have a valid role in terms of approving or not approving? So, because you hit on a site plan. So what are those 2 times when we would potentially see something again associated with the potential for phase 3 development? And what role do we play when those 2 times come up?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So the first opportunity for council to see this application again or part of this proposal is through the subdivision agreement. And so that is an agreement that is executed by council. So staff typically work with the developer and then present a recommendation with a draft agreement to council for consideration. And it was pointed out to me that that might be an opportunity at the subdivision agreement stage to look at traffic calming on Lake Forest Drive, if that's something that we would want to see happen here. So that is the first opportunity. The next opportunity is that staff present all site plan control applications to council for their input and feedback. And then those comments are taken back. And if there are recommendations or changes needed, those are discussed with the developer before it goes to the CAO for final approval.
Okay, further comments from members? I guess I just comment that it's important to remember that this piece of land is zoned for development today. And so even if council made no change today, the property owner could go ahead and build a highway commercial development, and traffic would head in and out of that development and probably into the surrounding subdivision. And it would probably be a fair bit more traffic because businesses generate an awful lot of traffic, particularly very successful ones. So, so we're not really making a choice about whether or not to develop this land or whether or not to introduce traffic to this area. The developer has a right to, would have a right without coming to us to develop the land and build commercial units there. So the question then is really whether we want to add the residential component. And I think adding the residential component is not a bad thing. I can't see a compelling reason to say no to that proposition. I think there's, as has been, in fact, lots of folks have said to this council over the last few years that adding residential components to commercial development is a good way to add housing to the community. So I think in that respect, I can't see a compelling reason to oppose it, and I don't see that we're changing the traffic situation for this area from what has been long planned for this area. So with all that in mind, I will support the resolution. So it has been moved and seconded. I'll ask all in favor. And opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're on to our second public meeting. Let me reset here. Okay, so next on the agenda is a public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z-2025-037 for Mitchell. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act. If anyone from the public is interested in this application or wishes to receive a notice of the decision, please send an email to bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. First, we'll receive a report from planning staff. Then we will hear from the public who are here in person, virtually, or have submitted correspondence to the email address bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. Then council members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I will ask them to reserve their comments on the application until we've heard from the public. Members of the public are advised that the right to appeal the decision on this application is limited to specified persons and public bodies as defined in the Planning Act, or the owner or applicant of the land subject to the amendment, who have provided oral or written comments to council on the application before the decision is made. After we have heard from the public, council will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. So I'll now declare the public meeting to be open, and I'll ask the planner on the file to present the application, and this one is going to also be presented by Julie Steeper.
Thank you. The purpose of the application is to rezone the property to allow for 2 additional residential units and to seek relief from the rear yard and exterior side yard setbacks to the existing garage. If approved, the application would recognize an existing additional residential unit in the single detached building and facilitate a conversion of the existing detached garage into an additional residential unit. The property is 570 Johnson Ave. and is located southeast of Waterloo Street and Johnson. The site is surrounded by residential and commercial uses. The site currently contains a single detached residential building and a detached garage. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing garage into an additional residential unit. There also is a additional residential unit that's currently located within the primary dwelling on site. The proposal would recognize the existing unit within the dwelling. The site has immediate access to a municipal road, which is Waterloo Street, and fronts onto Johnson Ave. The property is within the downtown core of Port Elgin with access to shops, services, and amenities. The proposal would make use of an existing building on site. Infrastructure will utilize existing municipal services. The proposal supports the efficient use of land and infrastructure and will provide further housing units for the community if approved. The term additional residential unit means a separate residential unit that is located within a detached house or within a building or structure that is auxiliary to a detached house. Additional residential units may be permitted in any designations where residential uses are permitted as a primary use, subject to the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Although zoned core commercial special due to the proximity to the downtown of Port Elgin, the subject lands have been used for residential purposes in the past. The planning justification report submitted with the application notes the exclusive residential use and that there should be consideration given the allowing for residential units given the other supporting housing policies in the official plan. The proposed minimum rear yard setback for the detached additional residential unit is 1 meters, whereas the required in the zoning bylaw is 3 meters. The applicant is seeking relief for 2 meters. The proposed maximum exterior side yard setback for the detached garage is 5.6 meters, whereas the required in the zoning bylaw is 1.2 meters. The applicant is seeking relief for 4.38 meters. The relief being requested is captured in the bylaw through a provision that recognizes the existing setbacks of the existing residence and the detached accessory structure. Comments from the town were received regarding the proposed rear yard setback to the proposed additional residential unit in the garage, in particular in relation to the proximity to the adjacent parking area to the south, which serves the apartment building to the east of the site. The zoning bylaw permits similar setbacks adjacent to parking areas or roads. The conversion of the garage to an additional residential unit will not increase the height or size of the existing building. Moving the existing structure isn't possible given its current proximity to the principal dwelling. The proposed setback reflects an anticipated and acceptable built form outcome based on the space available and discussion with the town. Screening was determined as not to be required. There are no anticipated land use compatibility issues with the adjacent uses, which include the residential apartment and the associated parking area, residential dwellings to the west, and a vacant parcel to the north. The fire chief has provided comments regarding fire suppression, occupant egress, accessibility, and other considerations for the applicant to address with the town at the building permit stage. No comments for the public were received on this application, and this concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. So we will now turn things over to the public and start with the applicant or their agent. I see the agent for the applicant, so your name for the record, please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Ron Davidson. I'm a planning consultant and I'm representing Scott Mitchell, who's the owner of the property through his numbered company, and Scott's with me tonight. I'm going to be very brief. Julie did a thorough job in explaining the proposal. When I'm done though, Scott is going to say just a couple words, if that's okay. So there's two things really with this zoning bylaw amendment. First of all, when Scott acquired the property a few years ago, the house, the main building, already had a second unit or apartment, if you will, upstairs. But since then, he has learned that the town zoning bylaw doesn't actually allow for that second unit, and that it might not qualify as legal nonconforming. So as Julie indicated, the zoning bylaw amendment before you will first of all add that or recognize that unit upstairs. So it's removing any uncertainty about whether or not it's legal nonconforming or not legal. And then the second part of the zoning bylaw amendment again is to deal with the unit in the garage. So Scott started doing some renovations a couple of years, or not a couple of years ago, a while back, not that long ago, in forms of turning the detached garage into another unit. However, the current zoning does not allow for that. And when he found out, he stopped the renovations and he retained my help to assist in getting the zoning bylaw amendment approved. And again, that's to allow for the garage to be converted to a dwelling. And just to be clear, nobody is living in there now or has been living in there. And Scott's just going to speak very, very briefly about that. So just jumping into the merit of the application, Julie did, again, a good job in talking about this and identifying the merit with the application. The lands are used exclusively for residential purposes, as are all the abutting uses. There should not be a land use conflict created as a result of this. The building itself, the garage that's being converted, the neighbors shouldn't be impacted as well due to the fact that it's not changing in terms of height, size, or volume. So nothing is changing on the building except the interior. There, as Julie indicated, there was some relief required for this building because accessory dwelling units in a separate building are supposed to be located a little bit different than what's being proposed, but the building is where it is. And it's a little bit too close to what's identified as a rear lot line, which for all intents and purposes is really a side yard, but by definition it's a rear yard because it's a corner lot. The people next door, which is a parking lot associated with an apartment building, the owners have no issue with this encroachment into the otherwise required rear yard setback. The other provision we're looking for relief from is the 1.22 meter maximum setback from the front lot line. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't in your downtown core. You want all your buildings hopefully flush right to the front lot line. On the side streets, that makes no sense. Not conforming with that 1.22 meter maximum front yard setback seems to make a lot of sense, in my opinion. Quickly here, rental housing is in short supply in the town, and I know this is an issue that's near and dear to the heart of council and town staff, and hopefully just about everybody, because the municipality needs more rental housing. In this particular location, it's so close to the downtown, it's a block away, close to shops and services. As you heard, it conforms with the official plan and is consistent with the provincial planning statement. I should note that I was sent the town's comments a week or two ago, and I think I addressed most of them, if not all of them. There was a comment in there about requiring a zoning matrix or a zoning compliance table, and I did provide that to the town. Lastly, and then I will stop talking, so it is zoned commercial, and allowing for this use will not change that. It's still going to be zoned commercial, so it doesn't preclude a commercial use happening in the future should the current owner or the next owner care to put something in on the main floor of the existing house. That's all I have to say, and Scott would like to take about 30 seconds to speak. Thank you.
Ron. Thanks, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to take the opportunity to apologize to everybody here about this error. When I started this work, I didn't think I needed zoning relief. I didn't think I needed a permit. It was existing structure. I thought I was doing a renovation. I was wrong. I've been told why I'm wrong. I accept and take responsibility for that. I am sorry, and I know what I will do in the future to ensure that this doesn't happen again, which is I'm going to ask staff before I do anything. So I'm sorry. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. Are there other people from the public here to speak in support of the application or with questions, concerns, or objections to the application? There isn't anybody in the gallery, so I'll ask, is there anybody online? And there's no written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report, presentation, or oral submissions. Okay, so then we'll go to council and ask if members have questions before we close the public meeting to discuss the application. And we'll start with Councillor Grace and then come to the other side.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And thank you, Scott, for that comment, and Ron for the explanation. Because, and my question is to, I guess, our town staff, Candace, would it be possible for you to amend your report to include the fact, because those explanations made a difference to me. hearing that the residential unit was in the main building, already constructed. When you bought it, that was done before you purchased the property. To me, the public reading this, because now we know what the background is, I think it would be helpful for them to have that context or that information. Is that appropriate?
We'll look to the planner. It's the planner's report, so we'll ask the planner.
Certainly, this is my report. Certainly, I can speak to the fact that yes, it is existing for clarity purposes. It was established that it was existing in the unit when he bought it. However, this property did undergo a zoning a couple years ago, which had addressed a single detached dwelling, and at no time was an existing unit mentioned as an additional residential unit in the primary building at that time.
Councilor Grace?
Okay, and was Mr. Mitchell the owner at the time with that application?
I cannot determine who had ownership of it at the time, but I believe so. I cannot confirm ownership from that time. The minutes of this meeting will also form part of the record, which will help establish that as well.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Okay, we'll come over here to Councilor Halpin and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. We've, this council's given quite a bit of cooperation with developers in building residential units and adding to the rentals that we needed. I see this as just kind of a slap in the face for our cooperation with you in the past. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I have a question. I went back and watched our meeting from December the 18th, 2023, when some aspects of parking were talked about. It was more specific to the apartment building, but there was a very specific reference in that meeting that council was told that when we enabled everything that was going on these two parcels of land, that the asphalt that was adjacent to Waterloo Street was to be removed and a boulevard was supposed to be planted with grass. This is parallel to the house. The asphalt was removed and concrete was poured there. So my question is, I just want to know, will that concrete be removed to match what was supposed to happen back in 2023? That's my question for the planner, the developer, somebody, because we were very specifically told that in that meeting.
Who wants to take that one? The applicant?
Thanks. That is existing concrete that was there when I purchased the property. We didn't pour a new pad. Now that you mention it, we did discuss that. We can talk about removing there was never asphalt, there was all concrete pad. No issue with that.
Okay, the deputy.
Well, I would appreciate that you do have that conversation. Thank you for that. Because the attempt was being made to improve the situation at an intersection. And so it was, I have seen many cars still parked there, and it was intended to be returned to green space in the boulevard. So, you know, the concrete can stay adjacent to the house on that property, but it would be nice if what we were told is followed through. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Further comments from, or questions from members? The Vice Deputy Mayor?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so I'm clear, when Mr. Mitchell, Scott, when you bought the property, there was an apartment unit upstairs, correct? Already constructed, that's correct?
Correct.
And secondly, when you bought the property, the garage, was it developed as an apartment unit, or have you done that since 2003 without a permit?
So the house, when I first purchased it, I rented it to a single family with adult children. The parents lived in the main floor, the adult children lived in the second floor. They lived there for 3 years through the development of the apartment. When they left, we went in and refreshed it, updated electrical. The detached garage was there, it was insulated, it had sewer and water, and it had electrical when I purchased it. When we developed the adjacent lot, we moved the structure over at that time and put it on top of a new foundation.
So, Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Mitchell, I should say. Did you, and you've done more work on that garage, and the question is, was it done, why was it done without a permit?
As I said, I was under the impression that I was doing a renovation. I was wrong. I thought I was connecting to, and to services that were already existing on that, in the structure.
Okay.
And I was totally incorrect.
Okay, that's fine. So hence your explanation earlier, Mr. Davidson mentioned that in consultation with your lawyer, you then stopped work. I read in the report that the staff issued a stop work order. Which is it?
I didn't believe he said
which-
lawyer. If he did,
Pardon me?
nope, the CBO was on the adjacent site looking at some site plan
So the
agreement
staff
stuff,
issued a stop
and
work
staff issued a stop work.
I thought Mr. Davidson said that once you consulted with your attorney that then you stopped work. That's what I thought I heard.
Sorry, Councillor, no, I didn't say that.
So the severance that happened, one of the conditions was the garage be moved, correct?
That's correct. The original proposal was that we had parking on Waterloo Street, and it was decided that that was not appropriate based on the amount of traffic that's there. So in order to allow all the parking to be on the laneway, we moved the garage
You
over.
moved the garage. So
Correct.
what you're saying, you mentioned just a minute ago, Mr. Mitchell, that the garage has plumbing and electrical. So when you moved the garage, was the plumbing put in after that then? After you moved the garage?
So when the new foundation was put in, as far as I'm aware, I didn't do the work, but as far as I'm aware, the plumbing hookups and everything were just transferred over to the new
Right.
pad, and we moved the structure and put it on top of the new pad.
I see. And could staff just explain to me again, this, I think Mr. Davidson mentioned that it's zoned commercial? Is that correct?
Yes, it's a commercial core zoning that has special provisions.
And do we allow in our bylaw, do we allow additional rental units in the commercial zone?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So it's a distinction that in the commercial core, we allow for accessory dwelling units, which means those are accessory to the primary commercial use. Additional residential units are permitted in the residential zones. So because we don't have a commercial use here, the additional residential unit isn't an outright permitted use. So they're asking for that through this application.
It's not a permitted use. They're asking for that change, correct? Okay.
Okay, the deputy mayor? Sorry, apologies. I got to go to Councillor Mayette. He hasn't spoken yet. Apologies, Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. My recollection back in 2023, and I don't always have great recollection, but I remember the conversations that we had around that garage. And initially you had proposed, this is I'm asking through you to the applicant, proposed you were going to tear the garage down. And then on second thought, we said, well, it's a pretty good looking building to just tear down. And then it was chosen to be retained and subsequently moved to allow for the off-street parking. I recall all that taking place, but I don't recall any discussion about the existing building, the former Silken bed and breakfast building. I don't recall that there was any questions asked or any reason for disclosure as to what was inside that building, because the focus of the application at that time was for the severance, for the new buildings, for the parking accommodation and all those things. And since that time, there's been quite a bit of development on this corner of similar nature. But so at what point did you discover or did you decide that you needed to get a zoning change for the additional residential unit within the building itself? And like, apparently it was existing. We all knew that this was operated as a commercial entity, as a bed and breakfast in the downtown commercial zone. So what triggered this realization?
The applicant, or the agent for the applicant.
I should answer that. I should, first of all, state I was not associated with the previous application. But I will take, I guess, I don't know if blame's the right word. To answer your question, I found this out after I filed the application. As Candace explained, she didn't use the word confusing, but it is confusing. If there is a commercial unit downstairs, the apartment that is up on the upper floor is permitted. But the fact that there's a residential unit downstairs, the second unit is not permitted upstairs. I didn't read the zoning bylaw that way. So when Scott hired me, I filed a planning report and an application that dealt solely with the garage. So that's on me, I guess. I mean, I didn't know that. And then it was brought to my attention through discussions with Julie and Candace, and rightfully so. I agree with them. It's confusing, and I'm a planner with a lot of experience, but they're right. So it was at that point, only maybe a month ago, that we changed our application to reflect the fact that the second unit upstairs, unless it's legal non-conforming, it needs to be recognized in the new zoning bylaw amendment.
So you're just correcting what has apparently been a long-standing non-conformance.
That part of it, yes, that's 50% of it, yes.
Right, and then, yeah, the garage is a separate matter altogether.
Brand new, separate matter.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Are there other members who haven't spoken yet who wish to speak to the file? If not, then we'll come to the Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Halpin.
It's a question for the planner. I think it was mentioned that it's zoned commercial core commercial. And so even though, the request or the application is related to making it 100% residential, it could potentially be commercial. Would that trigger a conversion application, or could that just happen? I just want to clarify, just so that should there be a change of use, does that trigger another application?
So through you, Mayor, to answer that question, the current zoning of the property is core commercial special. It's like core commercial 11. It identifies the single detached dwelling. If you were to move forward with this current zoning bylaw that recognizes the residential use and the additional residential units, yes, like a rezoning would be required if commercial, like it depends on the types of what's proposed, but potentially, yes, they would need a Planning Act application for rezoning for a different use.
Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you. So the egress, the entrance to this is on the 1 meter setback. Is that correct?
The planner.
By egress, do you mean like where the parking is? The parking is to the side of the garage. The access to the garage, like by way of a person entry into the garage, I believe there's the door at the rear, which is within the 1 meter. If you're speaking about the access to the physical building, yes, it's in the rear 1 meter setback.
Okay, so 1 meter next to a parking lot. So is that for the planner, and would that be a normal situation? And like, we're asking for a relief of 4.3 meters, which isn't minor in nature. That's a fairly big ask. And we have 1 meter off of a parking lot. Thank you.
In regarding entrances to buildings, that's outside my scope of expertise necessarily, because I don't see particular designs of buildings. So I can't really speak to the relation of what's typical or what's not. However, the applicant does need to speak to the fact, or does need to like meet some of the comments that were addressed with building code and fire chief as well. So those sorts of things will have to be taken into consideration in the final construction of what needs to be converted within the building.
I guess I might just follow up on that because that's one piece that stands out to me. So it's a 2 meter, asking for 2 meters of relief on the rear yard, which from the standpoint of the additional dwelling unit is really the front yard because that's where the front door is to this additional dwelling unit. So like, so you have the traffic in that parking lot backing up there, with 1 meter space. And if you had a big pickup truck and you backed out over those, like you see, there's a picture there. And if you backed over the curb, you'd be very close to the front door of this place, which is the only point of access and egress to this additional dwelling unit. So I guess my question is, and I read in there, and the fire chief talked about it being a matter for the building permit. Do we know, like, can they get a building permit? Like, do we know if that actually complies with the building code to, like, because just seems, I went by and had a look at it, like, it's kind of jarring to me. Like, if I just looked at the back of my truck and I backed it over that curb, like, I could come damn near to touching that door. Like, so could you get a building permit if we offered this zoning? Candace?
Yes, the building official has reviewed the proposal from strictly the zoning perspective. So right now we're looking at just the relief required to allow that building to stay in existence where it is and be used as a residential unit. So that piece of the review has been done and they haven't objected or provided necessarily negative comments. However, their more detailed review under the building code has yet to be done, because the way that it works is that a stop work order was issued, and before they'll review what needs to be assessed under the building code for the actual structure, they need to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. So that review will occur after. If the application is approved and the proposal can meet the zoning bylaw based on any amendments that are proposed, there'll be a more thorough review done by the building official.
And so we don't normally consider a building when we're doing zoning, we don't usually worry about the built form because the two things are kind of separate, which is why the planner isn't an expert on built form. But in this case, the built form already exists, so it's hard to ignore it. You have to like take it into consideration. But we can't answer the question, like if we do this zoning, we can't answer the question as to whether we're setting up a situation where the existing unit can even get a building permit. I don't know, maybe the manager of development services can help me out with that.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not to profess any expertise, but it is to observe what I have observed over several of these over the many years I've been, is that this building review by the building official may result in revisions or changes to the structure, meaning that access may not stay there. It'll be a conversation between the owner's designer, building designer, and the chief building official to determine how that egress would comply with the code, including the fire code.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there further questions? Councillor Halpin.
Thank you. So as I recall, when we zoned this other one, you were able to park all your vehicles off the road. But now if you add 2 more units, you're not going to be able to accommodate all parking on your property. Would that be a fair assessment?
The planner for the
I think we're talking about 2 separate, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I interrupted you. We're talking about 2 separate properties. So the property we're dealing with tonight for the 2 accessory dwelling units has sufficient parking.
Okay, Councillor Halpin, further questions? Okay. Any further questions from members before we close? Yep, the Vice Deputy.
I just have one last question with the legal non-conforming, the unit upstairs, the apartment unit that's legal non-conforming. So to the planner, what has to happen there in terms of that particular, to me, there's part A, part B. And the part A is that the need for an apartment unit upstairs, there is a big need in our community. So what happens to the legal non-conforming with this application?
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. I don't know if a determination on legal non-conforming has actually been made at this stage. The building department will review any works that have been done and evaluate what needs to be done in terms of meeting code. There's separation requirements and other criteria. My understanding is that there was an existing scenario in that dwelling. Whether that typically a bed and breakfast would only have one kitchen and would then have additional bedrooms. At this point, the building department will need to do the review to determine has an additional kitchen, an additional unit, standalone residence been created within that dwelling, and that needs to meet all of the building code requirements, and they'll do that review.
A comment, the agent for the applicant?
Yes, so if it was in fact a legal non-conforming use, we would not be talking about this tonight because it has legal status and there's nothing the town, I say this respectfully, that there's nothing the town can do about it. I have not uttered the words that this is legal non-conforming. I did say we can't prove that it is, so we're assuming it isn't. So if it's not legal non-conforming, it's not legal. So that's why that's part one of our two-part application.
No? All right. If there's no further questions, and I don't see any, then I will now declare the public meeting to be closed, and we do have a resolution. The resolution is that subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting, the council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z-2025-037 Mitchell and bylaw 100-2025. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Mayette, a seconder. Councillor Stack. All right, questions or comments from members to the resolution? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and through you, it's a comment. I just want to express appreciation to town staff for doing their best to reflect what the decisions that are made at the council table. So I really appreciate the work that's gone on. How do we know that? Because we're being asked to vote in favor of something that there's still some big question marks. How do we know that it's gonna be what we've sort of heard? Like I'm really struggling with, we're being asked to vote for something, but there's still a number of items that seem to require some additional decision making. So if we approve this, are we giving tacit approval to, everything else, or not?
Well, wouldn't be tacit approval, it would be approval of the zoning bylaw amendment. So you'd be approving everything that is reflected in those in that zoning bylaw. Councillor Helbin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I think there's too many issues with this. I won't be supporting this. I won't be supporting it because I don't like the process that they went through to do it. And this council's been very clear. We don't like people that are asking for doing things without permission. We're a very cooperative council and we need to enforce that. My other comment is just, I don't think you're at a stage yet for this. I don't like the door being a foot off the parking lot. Snow could get pushed into that. I'm just not in favor of this one. Thank you.
Okay, are there further comments from members? Councillor Stack.
I'm probably all over the board, but I think when we talk about approving or like retroactively approving sort of non-conformances or whatever we're calling this, I think we've done that plenty of times. I can think of one in particular, I can't remember what they call it, the beehive or the honey hive. Like that was built completely outside of compliance and then we approved it. So I think I know I made a stink about the zoning issue, but I think this is a bit different. Like we make these types of approvals fairly regularly. So if we're going to decide that this is the one that's not, we better be clear that there's a good reason why this one in particular doesn't merit approval, whereas we've approved many other similar situations for at least for the entirety of my term. We've done several times. I just caution us to be assured that we're being consistent and equitable in our decisions in that regard.
Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I, on the other hand, am going to support this application because the applicant in his ways and in his company have had quite a bit of residential units in our community, and they've for the most part done a really good job of it. From what I can see, they're responding to our call for more rental residential in our communities. And this is, taking advantage of a space that was in the garage instance that was not being utilized to its full extent, and he's using it to create affordable or at least rental housing, assuming somebody can afford it. And the upstairs, it's the way he got it, whether or not it's conforming legally or not, it is also a viable place for somebody to live. So, the methodology might not be sound and totally above board, but I think the overall intent is there, so I will be supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Just a message to the community, please, 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 speak to staff, speak to the building department. Like, there's a building permit process. And I guess that's my message to the members of the public is speak to the building department first and then make your move.
Thank you. Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will not be supporting this. There appears to be far more questions than there are answers. And maybe one day down the road, and not too long from now, it can be supported. But I, in good conscience, can't support this right now. I agree with what's been said about the entranceway 1 foot from a big white truck that's sitting there in the pictures that we have. This has to be straightened out, and then it can come back to us. Otherwise, we're putting ourselves, or the people are putting us under the bus. And we're supposed to be nice guys and say, oh yeah, okay, we'll let this go this time, but next time, well, the next time has arrived. And I still think it's doable, but it has to be done correctly. I won't be supporting this.
Thank you. Further comments from members? Yeah, I mean, and there's Councillor Stack is right that there's no question people build things without permits, and council has approved those things in the past when it makes sense. But there's no precedent there. I mean, council looks at each case individually. And so we look at this case individually. I certainly appreciate the applicant's apology for having undertaken that work. I have to say that's more than a lot of those applicants would have done. So I do appreciate that. But I am concerned. Again, my concern is about that 1 yard, is about that one piece, that reduction from 3 meters to 1 meter in that rear yard, because I'm worried about that access and egress. And I don't know if the building code picks up a solution to that problem. Like, I don't know if there's a loophole there or not, that, so I really don't like that scenario that's there, that we're permitting that 1 meter setback where the front door is, and they're parking cars right out front of it, like within, less than a meter potentially of that front door. So, and as I say, I don't generally look at zoning with respect to that built form, because zoning is about more than the built form that's sitting there right now. But in this case, with the built form being right there and what we're enabling by allowing it, and reading between the lines of the staff report in terms of the concern that the staff are giving us on it, I don't like it. I don't think I can support it because of that concern. So I'll be voting against it. Are there other comments? Seeing none, then all in favor? And opposed? It's defeated. Okay, so now we'll move on to reports of municipal officers and committees. The first one there is use of development agreements, and we'll turn that over to the planner, Monica Morrison.
Thank you very much, Mayor Charbonneau, and good evening, Council. Switching gears a little bit, we've heard from our department on some planning files tonight, and I'm coming to speak to more the broader picture of tools that are available under the Planning Act, in particular development agreements. So I'm here tonight because from time to time we do bring reports from the Planning and Development, the County Planning and Development Department, to provide updates or educate council on planning matters. And with regard to development agreements, we do use this tool routinely for things like subdivisions, condominiums. Earlier this evening, we were talking about site plan agreements. But it is more rarely used in examples like for minor variances or conditions of consent. And when it comes to consents, the county being the approval authority, there may be times when use of a development agreement is recommended as a condition of a consent, but that application would not have necessarily been heard by this council unless there was an accompanying planning application, like a zoning bylaw amendment that accompanied that to bring that matter before you. So in that vein, we're providing this report for information to inform you about the use of agreements in those unusual cases, rare cases, so that council can be familiar with why we make those recommendations and how they are sometimes useful. So in framing the matter of the use of development agreements, I've spoken to the fact that these are commonly used and part of the normal process for a plan of subdivision or condominium. So I won't be talking about those examples tonight. What I'll be talking about is the more rare examples when development agreements are used for another type of planning application, like recommended as a condition of a minor variance or recommended as a condition of a consent. So when we're thinking of those types of planning applications, the time frame for how the issues that arise as part of that planning application is of important consideration when we're thinking about what tools we would use to address those matters. So I use an example in my written report that you have before you of a range of different tools that are available and the timing of the part of the planning process when those tools could be used. So in my report, I use the example of maybe we're talking about development on a site that has environmental issues. So an information requirement that we would have that would be asked for at the time of an application and before a decision is made would be we would require the information to be provided in the form of an environmental impact study. So as part of a complete application for, say, the zoning bylaw amendment that facilitates that development or the consent dividing of land that facilitates that, we ask the proponent to hire an ecologist and submit an environmental impact study. And if the result of that environmental impact study is that here's the significant features here and where you want to develop is over here, just steer clear of those features, then that information requirement could be enough to guide the development. We know where the no-go area is and where the yes-go area is. However, in some cases, you might have natural environment over the whole property. And the outcome of the environmental impact assessment is that there are ongoing requirements that are going to go beyond the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment or the approval of the land division that need to be applied over the long term. So in those cases, we need a tool that fits the long term. And as I outlined in this report, a development agreement is a tool that can last beyond the approval stage, the condition stage, and beyond to the life of this property. So in my environmental impact example, maybe there are mitigation measures or maintenance of natural areas that need to be maintained on the property. And so an agreement that outlines where those areas are on the property and requires the applicant to maintain those long-term could be a way to address those recommendations that came out of, and what we call mitigation measures that came out of that study. So in bringing this to you today, we recognize that the development agreement is a good tool in cases where development control is needed over the long term. But we recognize that we don't want to use that tool in all cases because there are significant administration requirements and monitoring involved to prepare, register, manage, and monitor agreements. So in looking around at the types of examples where we use development agreements outside of subdivisions, condominiums, and site plans, then it is a rare set of circumstances that we would apply this tool. So we wanted to recognize that if there's another tool that doesn't require the same level of management or a burden in terms of administration, then we would recommend a less burdensome tool. But in those rare situations where we need to provide that development control into the time span that goes beyond approval or conditions and out into a time period after a building permit has been issued, then that's when a development agreement would be recommended by our department. In preparing my report, we had some good discussions with staff, and one of the things that we expanded a little bit more in our research was just where development agreements are used in other jurisdictions and for what purposes. So in my report, I talk about applying development agreements to smaller scale developments. And what I mean by smaller scale developments is we're using the tool of a development agreement that we're very familiar with for large scale developments like subdivisions, and we're applying it to cases where the level of development is maybe the creation of 1 or 2 lots, or 1 lot, or taking an existing lot and applying some conditions related to lot grading and drainage to facilitate a particular development. So that's what I mean by smaller scale developments. So we put a call out to some of our partners, fellow planners in the county planner director group. And I said, you know, how are you using development agreements for things like consents? And they came back saying we use them for environmental monitoring considerations, like my example that I provided, where infrastructure is involved, like something needs to be constructed, like an extension to a road or some new municipal drainage. Ensuring engineering standards are met, so lot grading and drainage on the property. They've also used it in heritage preservations, development of multiple residential lots via consent, implementing study recommendations, and limited servicing agreements. So those are just some examples that we were able to find quickly through an email poll of our colleagues that work in other counties that are also rural counties around Ontario. So just to conclude, and I wanted to make my remarks brief and leave some time for your questions. It is likely that you will see development agreements proposed for these type of smaller scale developments. We know of other cases in other municipalities around Bruce County where the planning department has identified and recommend that as the best tool. And we know that that's likely to come up in Saugeen Shores as well. When we say that you're likely to see them for the smaller scale developments, again, what I mean is you're always seeing them for subdivisions and condominiums. We would like to use that tool in the rare cases where appropriate for smaller scale development, like the creation of a lot or facilitating development of an existing lot. In those cases, the development agreement itself wouldn't look as lengthy and detailed as an agreement that goes along with a plan of subdivision. It would be scoped to the issues involved, and it would zero in on the particular development issue that we're trying to address. So in my example of the environmental impact study, there would be a map to show the areas that need to be maintained for natural areas. They would show setbacks and that sort of thing, and then that drawing could be implemented through an agreement. So when I say scoped, I mean that it's going to be pared down to the narrow issue that we would be working on. Considerations when we are deciding whether a development agreement would be recommended is that there is some administrative burden and costs to the municipality and cost to proponents. And I've outlined in my report how municipalities can address those requirements, and again, to recognize, well, as we're looking at this as a tool, that knowing that there is an administrative burden and some costs associated with doing this, that it is a recommendation that we would make when we don't think that there is any other tool that would be appropriate that's less burdensome. So perhaps I will conclude my remarks there and return to the mayor and just let you know that I am available if there are any questions.
Thank you. So there's a resolution that this report be received for information. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Helpin and Councillor Stack, questions or comments of the deputy mayor?
Thank you. And through you, I just wanted to say, Monica, I think it's your first time here. So appreciate that. I had two questions, which were definition questions. You answered them both because I was concerned about what is smaller scale development and what do you mean by scoped development agreements? So thank you for responding as you made your comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments? I guess my only comment is that I hope we don't see any of these. Like, it seems like a lot of extra, like we've got by this long without doing them. And like, it just seems like another level of bureaucracy to me. So like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not super keen on them. Also, I would say if it's like in terms of severances or consents, these are county rules and the county is the approval authority, but we have to approve and manage these agreements at the lower tier level. So the county is making the approvals and then having us administer the agreements that they're setting up. And I guess that's because we're closer to the issue. But I would say that if that starts to appear, then this council we now have an agreement with the county in our latest MOU for planning, where the county could delegate its authorities to over consents. And I would say that if we start to see a lot of this, then we should write to the county and ask them to do the delegation of authority, because we should have, if we have to start doing this, we should have up and down control, since it is burdensome, not only to the property owner, but to our staff. The more of these little agreements we have, piece by piece, over little pieces of property across the municipality, if you start building those up over time, it's fine as long as the people who wrote them are still around. But in 20 or 30 years, if they stretch out, it becomes very difficult to manage. So again, I'm not super keen on them. I hope we don't have to have any. Those are my comments. Are there any others? Councillor Helpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Yeah, it seems to me like it is making more work and it's muddying the waters rather than streamlining things. So.
All right. Councillor Davinsky.
I don't know that I have anything new to add, but I just wanted to reinforce that when I read this, I thought the same thing as you, Mr. Mayor, another level of bureaucracy, and that scared me somewhat. I think we do a pretty good job on our own, the way we're doing it right now. And the paragraphs that stood out to me in this report, which I thank you for, the ones that stood out to me was it could cost the developer more and it could cost the municipality more. Well, I thought we were doing just fine with our control of large and small developments. So I'm not so sure we need this, but maybe I'm missing something here. I don't know.
Thank you. Are there further comments? Councillor Stack.
Just for clarity, we're not being asked to approve these as a usage. It's just a heads up that these can be used, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. We'll see if any come forward at this point. Are there any more comments? If not, so there is a resolution. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? That's carried. All right, so now we're on to 7.2, Amendment to Northport Meadows Phase 2B Subdivision Agreement, and Candace.
Thank you. So in September, just last month, the town passed a bylaw which authorized the entering into a subdivision agreement with Barry's Construction and Installation for Phase 2B of Northport Meadows. Certain clauses were inadvertently excluded from the agreement, specifically the clauses that were requested by the Blue Water District School Board related to sidewalks and busing. An agreement that fails to include those conditions will prevent the developer from fulfilling the conditions of draft approval. And so the developer has requested that we amend the subdivision agreement to include those clauses. The bylaw and the amended subdivision agreement are included as attachments to my report.
Okay, thank you. There is a resolution the council adopt bylaw 101-2025 to amend bylaw 90-2025, being the bylaw that authorized the entering into of a subdivision agreement with Barry's Construction and Installation Limited for Phase 2B of the Northport Meadows subdivision. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Grace, Councillor Mayette, questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. All right, so then we're on to the bylaws, and so we only have two bylaws to consider because bylaw 100 will not advance. So, oh, and I apologize too, that bylaw 99-2025 has to be adopted as amended. There was the changes there with respect to the height that were made. So that's as amended. So the resolution is that bylaws 99-2025 and 101- bylaw 99-2025 and 101-2025 are hereby read, passed, and sealed this 20th day of October 2025 as amended. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halpin. All in favor? That is carried. Confirmatory bylaw, the bylaw 102-2025 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores, hereby read, passed, and sealed this 20th day of October 2025. Mover and seconder. Moved by Grace, seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Carried. And finally, a resolution of this regular council meeting of October 2025 hereby adjourns at 8:32 p.m. Mover and seconder, Councillor Mayette and Councillor Stack. All in favor? Carried. It's a good thing it's good.